This is episode 17 with Erica Keswin.
So let's go. I'll follow, wherever you go, 'cause you're...
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Inventions Show, a podcast about all things invention and reinvention, where entrepreneurs, leaders and experts in their field today share their story of triumphs and challenges in both life and business. My name is Tacklee, entrepreneur, investor and the host of this show. Now today, my special guest is Erica Keswin, workplace strategist, dot connector, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and an expert in the business of working human. She helps top-of-the-class businesses, organizations, and individuals improve their performance by honoring relationships in every context. Now, her work and insights can be seen in media outlets such as Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and Fast Company, just to name a few. And I know you absolutely love her new book, Rituals Roadmap, The Human Way to Transform Everyday Routines into Workplace Magic. I might also like to quickly add that her first book, Bring Your Human to Work, was an immediate Wall Street Journal bestseller. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Erica, and thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to see you.
Likewise. Now, Erica, the first thing I'd like to ask all my guests, for those who are not too familiar with yourself, is can you please give us a window into your background, who you are and what was your first job?
Sure. So I've always been someone who has valued connections, kind of been from the time I was little. If you ask people who knew me when I was little in middle school and high school and business school and say, what's one word that you would use to describe Erica? My guess is that it would be that of a dot connector. And I've always worked on the human side of business in recruiting and executive coaching and human resources. But my first job was I moved to Washington, D.C., and I worked in the sales and marketing office of of the regional office of the Four Seasons Hotel.
Okay.
And so it was my first foray into business and hospitality and customer service and all that good stuff.
Awesome. That's cool. Now, as an expert in the business of working human, for our listeners and viewers out there, can you please share with us what is, the business of working human?
So I love that question because it forces me to really hone in on the essence of the book and the essence of my work. So if I were to boil it down to one sentence, working human means honoring relationships. And it's honoring relationships with yourself and also honoring relationships with others. And when you think about creating a culture where people think about things through the lens of relationships, what you find is that it's not only good for people, but it's good for business as well, and really does have a bottom line implication.
Oh, interesting, that one. Now, firstly, Erica, I want to talk about your new book, Rituals Roadmap, The Human Way to Transform Everyday Routines into Workplace Magic. I believe it's on pre-order at the moment, so people can grab it now with the official release date of 26th of January 2021. Now, the topic of rituals, that really interests me. I find it fascinating. And in your first book, Bring Your Human to Work, you sort of laid down the rules and protocols of a human workplace. Can you please give our listeners an idea of what Rituals Roadmap is about and how it's all connected?
Sure. So one of my big takeaways from Bring Your Human to Work was that rituals are really a tool of the human workplace, and that rituals not only have the power to bring people together, but they also have the power to really ground us, especially when times are tough. Yeah. And so I went back and I started interviewing all kinds of companies from Starbucks to Chipotle, Allbirds, LinkedIn, Microsoft, and I was looking at both the science and stories of the impact of rituals. And what I found is that it's not rocket science, but when you are intentional about bringing rituals both in your home life and in your work life, you can find what I call opportunities from rituals throughout your day. How do you begin and end your day? When do you eat with people? How and when do you take breaks? Even when you're at home, working
Yeah.
remotely these days,
Yep.
to also from the perspective of the employee experience. So I look at rituals around what rituals do you have when you onboard employees, when you have training and development, when you celebrate milestones, when you have professional development. So I looked at it from a couple of different angles. And the bottom line is that rituals give us, I call it the 3 Ps. Number one is they give us a sense of psychological safety and belonging, which is something we all need, especially right now.
Yeah.
Rituals also give us a connection to purpose, which is that second P. And both of those lead to better performance, whether that's human performance and or business performance.
It's all connected. I love it. Now through my readings, Erica, you mentioned that rituals, as you mentioned as well just now, drive workplace productivity. I mean, for our listeners out there and myself, what's the difference between like rituals, habits, and routines? Yeah,
that is a great question. And I think it's an important place to start so we know what we're even talking about as it relates to what's a ritual. So the litmus test that I use, number one is, do you do something, let's say, again, in the morning before you go to bed, the way you have a family dinner or a lunch with your team? Would people miss it when it's gone? Would it really feel that something was off if all of a sudden it went away? And number two, does it rise above its practical purpose? And what I mean by that is, let's take lighting a candle. Lighting a candle is not necessarily a ritual, but it is a ritual if it's done with intention and in a very specific way for a reason other than to provide light or add something nice to a room. So in other words, it means something. And so, for example, I spoke with someone the other day who lights a candle every Friday, and to him, it signifies that transition between the work day and the work week and the weekend. And so it's this, when you think of rituals, it's really this elevation, and rituals make us value that thing that we are doing more.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's like a more personal touch to it, where there is a reason why you do it. It's not just like an automatic thing, like a routine, for example.
And you're thinking about it, that there is this intentionality around it, and that's what brings you in that moment that sense of psychological safety and belonging and connection to other people or to yourself. And so, and for this candle lighting example, if a Friday came at 5:00 and this person didn't do it, something would really feel amiss if it didn't happen.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, now, Erica, technology, I mean, it has played a big part in our lives and has a big impact on relationships, both, in life and business. And it's like, we're also connected nowadays where everywhere you look, people are on their mobile device. I mean, when we could go to, restaurants and stuff, you see families at restaurants with their phone out, instead of talking to each other. So, and it's so easy to bring work back as well to wherever you are. So do you have any tips for our listeners on how people can, I guess, in a way, separate themselves from technology and at home and at work? Is it just a case of you just have to disconnect to reconnect?
Well, I do think disconnecting and reconnect is important. It's actually the name of one of the chapters in Bring Your Human to Work. But I think this is even a more important topic and issue to discuss in the middle of a pandemic when when we're commuting, at the end of our day from one room to another. It's almost harder to have those authentic transitions to help us get off the technology because we're not going anywhere. And so I do think rituals are a great place to start. So we can think about rituals as it relates to the beginning of our day, the ending of our day, how we transition. Someone spoke to me about this issue when I wrote Bring Your Human to Work, and he said what he would do, he would come home and he would put his keys in the drawer and wash his hands. And for him, that represented this transition from work to not working and getting off of his technology. And again, I gave the example of the candle, or it could be something different. You could be having dinner, with your kids, and you could say, okay, during this one dinner, we're all going to put our phones in a basket during the dinner. For some people, they might try to be off technology, for a digital detox Shabbat from Friday night to Saturday night, or employers might give employees a Zoom free day. So I think all of the approaches are different. There's no one right way to do it, but what I do know for sure, and you'll have to excuse the oh so cheesy pun, but left to our own devices, we're not connecting. And so if we realize that, we have to say to ourselves, well, what's important in our lives, in terms of whether it's disconnecting so you can connect more with yourself and get exercise or meditate, or disconnect to be with friends, get some sleep, whatever it is, you need to be intentional and build some systems and processes. And again, rituals really are a tool to help us do that.
So intentions. Okay. Love that one. Now, from your experience, Erica, and in your consulting work, what would you say is the top 3, mistakes that you see brands and companies make?
So I'd say the first one is around authenticity, that if leaders of companies don't speak in a real human voice, I'd say that there's been a real shift over the last number of years in a positive way, driven by millennials and Gen Z that want to connect with real leaders. And they want to not only work there, but they even want to buy products from companies where leaders are walking the walk and talking the talk. So I'd say that's number one. You got to be authentic these days.
Authenticity.
And if you're not, that's a mistake that companies make. The second one I would say is, when I'm at a conference or speaking to a group of people from different companies, I'll say, so how many of you in your companies have a set of values? And, 99% of the people raise their hand. And then I say, keep your hands up if you really know what those values mean, and how they work in your organizations. And then probably 3/4 of the people will lower their hands. And so what I see there is that companies have values. And again, this is another cheesy pun, but sometimes I can't help myself. They are on the walls. They're on the walls, but they're not in the halls. They're not alive. People don't know what they look like. And that's a mistake, again, in terms of attracting and retaining top talent. But also when you're out there in the marketplace selling products, people want to know who and what you stand for. And I'd say that leads me to the third point, which is there's also been a shift. I feel like even 5 years ago, there was this almost division between church and state of, we don't talk about some of these more political, broader social issues at work. And that now is shifted. So when I think about mistakes that companies are making, they're either A, not having a voice and speaking out on social issues, or on the other end of the spectrum, I think you can also make a mistake speaking out on too many issues. Like you can't take on everything. So think about issues that either impact you as a CEO leadership personally, or ones that are connected to your values and your brand, but you can't be all things to all people.
That's true. And I love what you said about the values, where a lot of organizations, they have it on the wall, but then it's like, it's just there because they have to put something out. So that's definitely interesting.
Well, right. And if people know that it's kind of BS, it really has the opposite effect. It's almost worse than not having any, to say, oh, these are all over our walls and on our plaques and on our website and on all these things, but we know that you don't really mean it.
Okay. Now, just curious, Erica, with what's going on, in the world at the moment with the pandemic, more people are working from home and there's less face-to-face interaction. On the leadership side of things, and like I said, without getting OD'd on Zoom, how do you think this will affect and change leadership moving forward and the way people interact?
I think, I mean, people might be sick of the phrase silver lining, but I do think that once we're past this, there will be some positive things that come out from a workplace and leadership perspective. If I'm being honest, when I wrote Bring Your Human to Work, I had a lot of people who got it and believed it, but I also had people that felt like it was more on the softer side of business. And those people are starting to get it, whether they like it or not. And the reason is, and I've seen it now with a number of organizations, if you want the people that work for you, if you're a manager, heading a department, a CEO, startups, really anything, if you want the people that work for you to share what's really going on in their lives, because in terms of how it's impacting their ability to work right now, you as the leader have to be willing to lead by example. And what does that leadership means? That it goes back to your other question. You need to be willing to be real and even vulnerable, which is not in everybody's comfort zone. But what I've seen, I mean, even a CEO can have a really bad day at work, or have your kids home screaming when their computer breaks down and can't go to school. So the more that leaders can show people their true selves, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the more you'll get people who work for you to do the same. And why is that important? Number one, then it gives you as the leader an opportunity to support your people with what they need, and that will lead to retention, which is good for business. It will also lead to opportunities to say, if you have a couple people and you figure out that what's going on in their house is really insane right now, you can get other people to pitch in and help them deliver what they need to deliver to the client, or finish the deck, whatever it is. But if you have a culture where people are scared and won't really tell you what's going on, it will be detrimental to your business. And I've seen it up close and personal over and over again.
Wow. Vulnerability, the one that you were saying, that's a really good one, where you wouldn't think that if you see a CEO, they'll let sort of like the personal side of things come out. But yeah, that's definitely a wow moment there. So now, Erica, you've also founded an awesome platform, the Spaghetti Project, which has been featured in the New York Times. I mean, I've subscribed to it, the Spaghetti Project Digest myself, and love it. Can you please share a little bit on what it's about and your vision there?
So the Spaghetti Project came to be when I was writing Bring Your Human to Work, and I came across a study out of Cornell University by a professor named Kevin Niffen. And Kevin was studying team performance. What makes one team higher performing than another team? And he was getting his PhD, finishing his work, and he doing the study, and he decided to study firefighters and firehouses because his dad was a firefighter, and that's how he grew up. And the short version of what he found just really blew me away. And what he found was that the firefighters who were the most dedicated to the ritual of the firehouse meal, of sitting around the table and building trust with their fellow firefighters, it actually correlated with higher levels of performance. And in that world, they actually saved more lives. And so I started interviewing firefighters and hearing their stories, and and how this actually comes to be. And when you read a lot about firefighters, you come to know that their stereotypical go-to meal is spaghetti. And so I, in honor of the firefighters, launched the Spaghetti Project, which, as you said, is a platform that really shares the science and stories of connection at work. And so for the last 4 years, every month I host what I call a Spaghetti Project event, where I get different groups of people together to talk about connection and what's keeping them from connection, and rituals and the benefits of their connection. It depends on what's going on in the individual organization. Now we're doing some of it remote. And I will say, I really cannot wait to get back in person with some of these groups.
Yeah. No, awesome. And I'd really highly recommend to our listeners and viewers out there to check it out. And I'll put some show notes at the end, Erica. And now, Erica, and out of interest, what do you think has been your biggest area of growth and challenge to date?
Wow. Well, I mean, I would say over the last 8 months, once March hit and we were quarantined, if I'm being totally honest, I travel around the country and really the world giving talks about bringing your human to work. And within 3 weeks, I think a year's worth of talks were canceled. And so it's for many people, it's been, I have 3 kids. So figuring out, first I wanted to make sure everybody was safe and dealing with a bunch of different personal challenges, and then saying, well, okay, what can I do? And one of the first things I did is focused on how I can give back kind of in this moment. And there is really a correlation between lowering your level of stress and raising, your feel-good hormones by figuring out ways to give back. So I did 2 things. I gave a bunch of free online talks about how to bring your human to work when you can't go to work. And that really just took me out of the stress of wondering what on earth is going to happen to everything that I had been working on for a bunch of years. The good news is, I think people are realizing that conferences are not coming back anytime soon. So we do need to start doing them remotely. So that's good. And the other thing that I started to do was I was offering coaching to people. Anybody can go online, and for a couple of months I offered free coaching and just talking to people. So many people had lost jobs. And I think when you build this idea of giving back in your family life or in your work life, it helps you get through your own turbulent times.
Okay. Love that. Love that. So, turning point or points, Erica, when you look back at your entire life, everything that you have at the moment, your career and everything that you have, what is that one thing that changed everything for you? A moment where you look back that made you who you are. I mean, is there one thing for you, or more, I guess, a collection of moments?
Well, when I think about, there's 2 things, sort of this 2 bookended experiences that really got me to this moment of where I am right now. The first moment was in 1998. It kind of helps show my age, but so be it. I had gotten in 1998 my first phone, and it was a BlackBerry, which I loved. And I was working in executive recruiting. I was engaged. And my then fiance, now husband, said, hey, I have a conference in Bermuda. Do you want to come with me? And I said, I would love to come with you, but I can't because I'm saving our vacation days for our honeymoon. But then I said to myself, you know what? I have this handy dandy device thing, and I think I can do it. So I went to Bermuda. I sat on the beach. I worked during the day. I saw Jeff and his clients at night. And I remember saying to myself, again, 1998, with my new device, my new technology, this is the life. This is the best thing ever. I couldn't even believe something like this existed.
So
it really
BlackBerry?
does date me. My BlackBerry, but just realizing you could kind of work from anywhere. Fast forward 10 years later and 3 kids later, I still had my BlackBerry because I loved it, but I had also gotten an iPhone. And I was beginning to see the impact that the technology was having on my life, and being addicted to the little red light on the BlackBerry, and having the other phone and 2 phones, and my kids saying, why are you always on your phone? And in contrast to that moment in Bermuda in 1998, now it's 2008. And I literally again said to myself out loud, instead of this is the life, I can't believe this is my life. And as someone who's always really valued relationships and connections, it was the contrast of those 2 events that helped be aware of all of these things going on, and led me to this moment where I'm writing and talking about bringing your human to work and bringing your human to everything that you do.
Now, that's interesting. So how do you pull everything together, Erica? You're a mum with the 3 kids. You run a business yourself. You're a businesswoman and you're a wife. So how do you pull everything together and make it so seamless?
Well, I don't know if my kids would would say it's so seamless, but it goes back to that question we were talking about earlier, which is around the values. And I think if you don't stop and say, what is important, what's important right now. And I think when your kids are different ages, things can change in terms of where you want to focus and where you need to focus. But without taking that time to really say, who am I? What is important to me? That then drives the rest of these decisions. And I often say, even from the perspective of a company values perspective, when you're at a fork in the road, you don't know whether to turn left or turn right, whether to take on a new project, so you're even busier, and you're at that fork, your values should help drive you to those decisions. Yep. And if they're not, either there's too many values and you're getting confused in that, or they're not the right values. And so when in doubt, I go back to that.
Awesome. Take note of that one, listeners. So Erica, everyone has their own definition of success. What does success mean to you, and how do you define it in both life and business?
Success for me is, I feel like I can really measure it by the depth of my relationships. That's really what drives me, and being able to make sure that I have the time to cultivate those relationships that are really important to me. And when I haven't had the time to do that, I can feel it. Sort of in my whole body, and I know that I need time to shift, even if it's away from work, to make sure that I have time to connect with with friends and family and people that are important to me. I will say, as I've gotten older, and I always read about this, and now I'm experiencing, once you turn 50, you're more open to just saying, what, these are the people that I'm going to focus on, and not really worry so much about everybody else. So it does get easier.
That's great.
With age, but to me, that's the legacy, and it's connected to what I feel like is my superpower. Connecting people to each other, connecting myself to people. And it's what I love to do.
Awesome. Now, in interesting times like this, what would your advice or message for our listeners be? And viewers. We have an audience from over 90 countries. Some places are starting to open up. Some still in lockdown, some going back into lockdown. And, people are in general still working from home. Besides reading your first book and you're pre-ordering your second book, what should people, leaders, and, those who aspire to be leaders be doing right now so they can come out, I guess, a better person?
It's hard to pick just one. But I'll go back to one of the things I said earlier, which was, left to our own devices, we're not connecting. And, the word that you picked up on, which was about being intentional. And so it's just, whether it's because of the world we're in right now and the impact of technology and the fear factor and the pandemic. I thought when I started quarantining, I would have so much time in the day to do different things and connect with people. And then you realize, even in quarantine, where I'm not getting on a plane and there's no commuting, I'm, going from one room to the next, it still wasn't happening without being intentional. And I think we all just need to realize it and figure out, whether you're an entrepreneur in your own company or a leader in a bigger company, what are your values? What's important to you? And again, if you believe in this, left to our own devices, we're not connecting, you've got to make it happen, whether it's, and a way to make that happen is through these rituals. It's going to happen in the morning. You're going to do it over lunch. We're going to check in. An interesting company example that just came up the other day, the organization Cigna, one of the things that they're doing is they asked all of their employees for Cigna International to check in with 2 people in their lives. It didn't need to be colleagues. It could have been anybody, and to report back on the impact of that. And I love I love that, because many of these things are not rocket science and they don't have to cost anything. And so when we think about being intentional, it's one of these things like just roll up your sleeves and do it.
Awesome, awesome. And just quickly for our viewers out there, that's the book. So make sure you grab a screenshot. There you go. Now, Erica, what's your legacy? You know, what do you want to be known for or remembered for?
I would say if I could get people to really pause and think about as they're making decisions or doing different things in their lives, if they can do it through the lens of honoring relationships. You know, to me, the world would just be a better place. And again, that's honoring relationships with others, but also honoring relationships with yourself. I think self-care is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, less taboo in the workplace, that, you know, why should we feel badly that we need to take time to honor that relationship also with ourselves? Because that ends up being good for us and good for business.
Yes, awesome, awesome. Now, the next two questions, Erica, I ask all my guests, so it's very interesting what comes back. Now, the first one, if you could have a billboard, you know, with anything on it, what would it be and why?
You know, I feel like I would go back to honor relationships, because especially, it's funny, I'm like picturing that billboard right now, you know, honor, like a big, especially with everything going on in the United States right now with the upcoming election. If everybody thought about things through this lens of honoring relationships, our country would not be as polarized. Like, you know, we can disagree, but if we do it in a way that honors relationships, it's a much healthier place for everybody.
Awesome. And you sort of touched on this a little bit just now, Erica, when you said superpower. So my question is, what superpower do you wish you had and why?
I've always wished that I could fly.
Yes.
I think that would be, you know, then I wouldn't have to be in the TSA line. I could just zoom myself wherever I needed to go. And now I can fly with my mask on and not have to worry.
Awesome.
But yeah, I think that would be a very cool superpower, to fly.
That is awesome. Now, fantastic chat, Erica. We have to work towards wrapping up, and super mindful of your time. You know, really appreciate your honesty, transparency, and willingness to openly share. I've just got two last questions. First is, where can people find out more about, you know, yourself and your new book?
Great. Best place is on my website, which is just my name, ericakeswin.com. And there it will have links to Bring Your Human to Work and to Rituals Roadmap. You can sign up for the newsletter. You know, you can see some videos and talks that I've given. Pretty much everything is right there on the website.
Awesome. And I'll definitely put some links in the show notes below. And secondly, what parting words of wisdom would you like to leave for our listeners and viewers?
Oh, parting words of wisdom. I would say, you know, we're at such a challenging moment right now on so many levels. And I handed in the manuscript for Rituals Roadmap on March 30th, 2 weeks into quarantine. And I said to myself, oh my God, what is going to happen here? Is this book never going to come out? Am I going to have to rewrite the whole book? And the world is changed. Yeah. And what I found, well, I took a deep breath and said, okay, well, we'll see what the editor says, you know, McGraw-Hill. But what I found was that I started calling back companies that were in the book and saying to them, you know, how are you? And what's going on with your rituals? And what I found across the board was that rituals, some of the numbers and the unemployment rate and some companies may have changed, but rituals were that much more important. That across the board, leaders of all levels found that they were leaning on their rituals. So what I would leave people with is that rituals can really make a difference in our lives right now, and to think about how you can create your own rituals roadmap and think about a day in your life, and whether It's when you wake up or when you have lunch or when you take a break or when you transition from working to home, even if that's a walk into the next room. Rituals are, can make a real difference in terms of your own health, wellness, productivity, and just overall happiness.
Powerful message there. Love it. Now, incredible shares and knowledge, Erica. Thanks again and really appreciate your time. Stay well, be well, and take care.
Thank you for having me.
All right. I hope you've enjoyed this interview. You can find me at 10-x.com and also on social media at iam.tacklee. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. If you're enjoying this podcast, please do make sure you subscribe and take a minute to leave us a review. Thank you.
YOLO, YOLO, it's our show.